My audience dared me to complete an ultra marathon in just 3 weeks. How did I pull it off? Well, the answer exposes the truth about a lot of social media influencers and their extreme challenges. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about social media, extreme challenges, and how I actually got the title of ultra marathoner in just 3 weeks. So here's the overall story. You guys know that we've raised a ton of money for Ukrainian units fighting on the front lines. And as part of our most recent fundraiser, I made an offer. I said if we hit the, at the time, unrealistic goal of $200,000, I would run an ultra marathon. And lo and behold, they did it. You guys did it. But there was just 3 weeks before the end of the fundraiser. So, in order to make good on my promise, I needed to find a way to actually complete an ultra in just a couple of weeks. And this is where I think the divergence happens between the social media influencer and reality, because there's the ideal and your favorite influencer, right? They're maybe on some performance enhancing drugs. They have this crazy social media. They need to do ever more extreme things. And they need to create an image that, especially as a fitness influencer, that they are just sort of this cut above, right? Nobody wants a fitness influencer who looks like everyone else. And so these guys will, at this point in the video, usually start to tell you about how hard they trained, about how extreme it was to prepare for this kind of event in 3 weeks. But what they won't tell you is what I'm about to share. And first off, I didn't start by walking out my door and saying, I've got to start training right away, or I'm going to meet with a doctor who's going to tell me that my idea is crazy. No, the first thing I said was, okay, let's come up with a plan. And what was the plan? The plan was to find the right ultra marathon. And FYI, any race that's over 26 miles is an ultra, which meant for me, I was going to be finding a 30-mile race, because there was no way that I was going to tackle anything larger than that. A 30-mile race really isn't that much further than a marathon. And we all know somebody that's run a marathon. But the other key part was finding an ultra with the right cutoff. You see, most marathons, they're going to cut you off at 6 hours, which means you have to keep consistently moving at a little bit faster than a 15-minute mile. Well, that's not really going to be feasible for me. I needed an ultra with a really generous cutoff time, and I found it. I found a trail run that had a, no kidding, 12-hour cutoff, meaning I could go at half of the slowest authorized pace of most marathons and still come out as a finisher. I was like, this is the solution right there. Okay. So given that, I said, listen, let's come up with some real targeted goals. And my math said I should be able to walk this thing at about a 15-minute mile pace. And that is little more than a brisk walk. Now, there's some technicalities, right? There was almost 4,500 feet of elevation gained over the course of this trail. It was really a true trail with a lot of rocks and gravel and some really challenging terrain. But I didn't know that at the time. I just signed up for this thing. But this, I think, is the first thing to understand, is that this was probably one of the easiest routes to get to the title of ultramarathoner. Now, having set my expectations, I needed to come up with a training plan that was actually going to work, because in 3 weeks, I had to prepare my body to walk, almost exclusively walk, for up to 12 hours. And to do that, I had to just simply go on a lot of long walks. That's it. That was the strategy. And so 3 times a week, I would do 8, 10, and at one time, 20 miles of walking. That was it. There's one morning I met my friend early on a Sunday, and we just walked a 10-mile loop around a lake in our city twice. Took us 6 hours. But then at the end, we were like, great, dude, if we did 20 miles, we can certainly do the 30. But that's the key. At no point, in fact, in my most serious training run, was I even breathing heavily. We actually just kind of talked the entire time we were on the little run. Walk. It was a walk. It was a training walk. Now, the thing that we did practice was fueling, because this is the summer and I live in Texas. It's hot. That was going to be one of probably the toughest parts about this whole thing. But again, you come up with a good plan. So on one of my early walks, I walked for 60 minutes. I weighed myself before, and then I weighed myself after. And I was able to calculate exactly how much water I had lost over the course of that walk. So I used that and said, okay, if that's how much I'm losing, that's how much I'm going to have to make sure I put in every single hour. You combine that with the fact that for a man of my size, a little online calculator tells you that I needed about 60 grams of carbs an hour. And so I was like, boom, there is a plan to replace everything that I burn in the course of this event. So now I knew I wasn't going to get dehydrated. I knew with the right fueling plan, you just buy some of those gels, that I wasn't going to get hungry or run out of fuel for my muscles. And I knew that a 15-minute mile pace was going to be literally just me in a chit-chat kind of conversant way. So then all I had to do was make sure that the week leading up to the event, I just dialed down my training to make sure I didn't injure myself. That was it. That was the plan. Now, race day comes along. It's time to execute the plan. This is the other hardest. This is probably one of the hardest parts, was sticking to the plan, because the plan says walk. And so for the first 10 miles, we just walked. And then the second 10 miles, we just walked around. Now we learned as we went that the terrain is much tougher than we thought it was going to be, that the back half of the course had so much elevation gain and so much difficult terrain that we actually ended up doing like 20-minute miles on it. But that's the appeal, because we had a good plan, right? We told ourselves every loop, we're like, listen, if we're going to think we can pick up the pace, we'll pick up the pace on the third loop. So we get through. We're executing the plan. I'm drinking lots of water. I'm fueling up constantly, and I am feeling good. I'm feeling so good that sometimes I'm like, we could jog a little bit. And my friend consistently was like, no, walk. So we walk. And we are walking so slow that they are actually, on the third lap, there's only about 30 total entrants in the 30-mile run. And of those, we are the only ones walking it. And so they are actually, on the third loop, start closing down aid stations as we pass them, because we are the last people on the course. And as we get to maybe the last 7 miles, I finally start to feel it. Yeah, my legs start to get pretty heavy. They get pretty sore. They get pretty stiff. Mind you, we've been walking for almost 9 hours at this point. And those last 7 miles, really, we've been walking about eight hours, I'd say. Those last 7 miles are pretty tough, especially given that last like 4 or 5 where you're really in the backcountry and you're really grinding on it. But, we made it this far. I just dug in and was like, I'm not going to stop walking. We got hours and hours. So, again, we're at 8 hours. We have 4 hours to do the last 5 miles. I'm like, there's no way we're going to screw this up. And sure enough, I dig in, I hike through it, and we walk all the way through to the finish line, finishing with a time just over 10 hours. And so they give us our medal, and they say, congratulations on being an ultramarathoner. Now, the takeaway from this, first off, I want you to understand that you may be like, hey, walk for 10 hours is still pretty tough. Yeah, but it's not so tough that I'd say the average fit person can't do it, right? Because at this time, remember, I have a 2-month-old. I have a 2-year-old. I have lots of better stuff to do than train for this event. And I executed this, right, with a level of fitness at the start that was really low, actually. I'd only been training maybe 60 minutes a day. Most of that endurance training, cycling, and biking, and only 4 days a week. So I'm not like in turbo good shape here. And what I think is important is that when I decided to do this, when I decided I was going to execute this ultra, all of my training focused exclusively on it. Now, I also want to point out that I had a bunch of advantages that the average person working an average job doesn't have, which is that a lot of those long runs, they were taken over what is effectively my own lunch break. Because I work for myself, I can take a 2-hour lunch break if I need to. I also had my wife who, on my very long training run and on the actual day of the race, took both the kids up to the in-laws, and they hung out basically all day until I came back. So I had this, free weekend childcare that really just came in clutch. And of course, a spouse who was willing to sign off on this. But there's still a larger story here that I think is important. Because one of the reasons I did this, and one of the reasons I'm making this video, is that you guys understand the job of social media is to elevate the influencer, especially in the fitness realm. They want to be aspirational. They have to be, because, well, they often sell supplements, right? They sell ads, and nobody was going to have an average dude sell their supplements. But by the way, if you want to become a dad of 2 who can execute on an ultra marathon, walk that thing, it's Strike Gum. This is my company. I own it. It's veteran owned. It's 90 milligrams of caffeine in every piece, 0 sugar. It's an energy drink, right? Except you chew it. But the bigger takeaway is that these guys want to sell you supplements. They have to sell you stuff. Then they sell you that stuff by saying, you are here and I am up here. And I have made of this incredible stuff, this iron unbreakable will that says that, I can run an ultra with 30 days of training because I'm Mr. Tough Guy. But what if that wasn't true? What if you, regular dude, were to sit there and go, I think I can execute this too. If I can come up with the right plan and take every advantage, then maybe I too can achieve these things that these influencers are doing. And I think that's what I want you guys to take away from this, honestly. The ability of an average person to do extraordinary things is a function of their willingness to say, what is necessary to do this? What are the free advantages that I can give myself? Because nobody, again, I point this out because nobody's going to sit there and tell you that the winner, right? Like, imagine if the winner of a Tour de France or the winner of a 100-mile race, they said, well, I didn't think it was fair for me to fuel strategically. I think I should just have it wouldn't have been fair, right? They don't say those things. It wouldn't have been fair for me to take the lightest possible gear because that's most efficient. You'd think that was stupid. That was impossible. The winners always take every advantage they can get. So if you want to do something that is exceptional, you too should take every advantage you can get. Because why wouldn't you? Right? Now, there's some advantages that are sort of pointless, right? Does an extra 2 ounces matter? Probably not. But again, in my case, finding an ultra with a really generous cutoff time and sitting there and saying, listen, while I'm training for these 3 weeks, I'm not going to do any other athletic training. It's going to be focused entirely. I'm going to do nothing but long walks. That's it. And it was kind of boring, but it was so efficient and it prepared my body so well for the task. And come up with a plan that is realistic, that gets you to your goal, and execute that plan. Not the more ambitious version, not the little voice in your head that says you could do more, you could go harder. Because ultimately, I think there's this missing conception that when you see these influencers, their goal is to present this image of themselves that is so beyond what you and I can achieve. But the truth is that the incredible things, when you remove the tricks of editing, when you remove the fact that, again, you can imagine how I could edit this video in a way that made me look like a tough athlete with an iron will and an unbreakable spirit, right? And that's not true. I'm an extremely normal guy. I'm a suburban dad. But when you remove the editing and when you remove the phenomenal wealth that a lot of these guys have, I'm thinking of guys like Nick Bare, who runs a multi-million-dollar company. It's like, okay, yeah, you have the best gear, you have the best of everything. And you remove the performance-enhancing drugs that, let's be honest, are pretty pervasive now. I mean, within 10 miles of my house, there are no less than 4 low-T clinics for men. So you remove that, and oftentimes what you're left with is exactly what I just talked about, which is a realistic, doable goal, a plan to execute it, a willingness to say, I don't need, if my goal is to complete the race, then my goal is not to complete it at a certain pace. My goal is not to train in a way that is hardcore or aesthetic or makes me feel a certain way, right? The average person like you choosing a singular goal and saying, this is my singular objective. I'm going to focus my efforts on achieving this thing, not a bunch of ancillary goals around it, not run an ultra, but also kind of fast, but also shoot good content, but also do this, but also do that. No, one goal, one achievement, and a willingness to say, listen, I want to put my finger on the scale in my favor as much as possible. Do not underestimate what you are capable of. That's all I had. Hit subscribe. I appreciate you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.